seated. I think we have Mr. Toyne.
Yes.
Mr. Toyne, would you state your full name for the record, please?
Nicholas George Toyne.
And do you wish to affirm or swear an oath?
Affirm, thank you. I, Nicholas George Toyne, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Sit down, Mr. Toyne. Yes, Ms. Seward.
Thank you. Mr. Toyne, until March this year, you were employed at the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industry.
That's correct.
And your previous role was Assistant Director, Liquor Control and Arbitration.
That's correct.
And you've received a witness summons to attend this Royal Commission.
Yes.
And along with that summons, there was a list of questions and a request to put together a statement.
Yes.
Now, in front of you, you should have a copy of a document.
Yes.
Does that look like the statement that you prepared?
Yes.
And does it run for 12 pages
Yes.
and 32 paragraphs?
Yes.
I see it is unsigned, but on the front cover it's got a date of 19 May 2021. Is that
Yes.
when you finalised the statement?
Yes.
And have you read the contents of this statement, and are you satisfied that the statement is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
I tender the statement of Mr. Toyne, which has number DLG.0001.004.0016.
The statement of Nicholas George Toyne, which bears the typed date 19th of May 2021 and the document identifier DLG.0001.0004.0016 is admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cale.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, Mr. Toyne, if we go to paragraph 4 of your witness statement, which I think
Yes.
is at page 0003,
Yes.
you describe there a lengthy career in regulating the racing, gaming and liquor industry in this state
Yes.
between 1988 and earlier this year, March 2021, when you retired.
1985 I commenced as a casino inspector.
1985.
Yeah, 14th of October 1985.
Thank you. Now, in those sub-paragraphs that you set out in 4.1 through to 4.6, do we read at 4.1 then that instead of 1988 it should be 1985 to 1991?
Well, I was employed as a government casino inspector in 1985, and in 1988 I gained promotion to a position of gaming inspector within the gaming division.
And did that broaden the role that you had?
At that stage they were separate divisions, so I moved from the casino inspectorate to the newly established gaming division, which was community gaming outside of the casino.
I see. So you had no role between 1985 and 1988 and 1981. I'll start again. 1988 and 1991 in relation to casino
That's right.
regulation.
Yeah.
Understood.
Other than the Casino Burswood Island Agreement placed certain conditions on community gaming, so my only involvement was ensuring that those provisions of the agreement were adhered to.
Right, so thank you for that. Can we then go down to the back end of those sub-paragraphs to
Yeah.
4.5 and 4.6? I'm looking there at your two last roles from 2012, Manager Compliance Liquor and Assistant Director Liquor Control and Arbitration.
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with casino regulation in those roles?
As Manager Compliance Liquor, the only role I had was sending liquor inspectors to the casino to do liquor work.
Yes. And Director Liquor Control and Arbitration?
No, that was making decisions for the granting of liquor licences and such things as fit and proper on persons in positions of authority.
So let me just follow on from what you said about 4.1, where you were the gaming inspector from 1988 and that moved you out of the casino regulation area.
Yes.
The gaming investigator function from 1991 to 1993, did that involve casino regulation?
I can't recall actually. We had so many restructures in the department. It's hard to keep up with it, but it was the beginning of the amalgamations of the divisions.
I see.
So I think we took on racing in 91 as far as the provisions of the Betting Control Act in relation to the TAB.
And you're talking about those amalgamations and restructures. When I was asking you a moment ago about your position after 2012,
Yes,
was that a product of a demerging, if you like,
yeah.
of what had previously been amalgamated, so that you had two streams, liquor and on the one hand and gaming on the other?
One of the first amalgamations was they actually created 3 positions of senior inspector: liquor, gaming and the casino. Ultimately, those 3 positions were amalgamated into one position, the manager compliance. So there was a manager compliance for gaming and a manager compliance for liquor.
Understand.
And gaming included the casino.
All right. Well, we might come to those. We'll come to the other roles in a moment in more detail. Can I start with your role as casino inspector, which I now understand you would confine to the period 1985 to 1988?
I did return to the casino as a supervising casino inspector. And
when was that, Mr. Toy?
Sorry. It was on my CV. It was, I think it might have been in the period 93 to 2006.
Do you mean in an acting role?
No, I transferred. At the time, the casino inspectorate had 4 teams of 4. There were level 3 inspectors and a level 4 supervisor. So I'd gained promotion to the gaming division, and at one stage I transferred back to a vacant position of supervising casino inspector. So I was in charge of 3 inspectors at the casino.
All right. Let's first of all, before I take you to that early period, 1985 to 1988, ask you about paragraph 14 of your statement at page 0005. You're talking there about carrying out the role of inspector only when you weren't in other acting positions. If I take you back to paragraph 8 at page 0004, paragraph 8 at page 0004. You're describing there holding the role of inspector pursuant to the Casino Control Act throughout your career with the department. Do I understand that to mean that you never ceased to be formally appointed to that position until you retired, even though from time to time you didn't physically act in that position?
What I mean by that is that I was an authorised officer until the day I retired. So I was an authorised officer under Casino Control Act, the Gaming Commission Act, the Liquor Control Act.
So authorised
and the betting
officer
control.
under the Casino Control Act to do what?
Well, I had all the powers of an authorised officer. So if necessary, I could be sent to the casino to perform duties there.
What were the powers of an authorised officer under the Casino Control Act?
When I first started in 1985, there was power to examine, to go to anywhere within the casino unimpeded, to examine gaming equipment and to commence prosecutions and issue infringements for breaches of the Casino Control Act.
And how did you receive those powers? Through an instrument of delegation?
Through becoming an authorised officer under the Casino Control Act, appointed under section whatever it was in the Casino Control Act. Section 9. Sorry.
Appointed by whom?
When I first started, it was Michael Egan was the Chief Casino Officer. Upon a successful employment within the Casino Control Division, I was authorised as an officer.
By whom?
By Michael Egan.
So by the Chief Casino Officer?
Yes.
And as I understand your evidence, that authorisation, to your knowledge, was never withdrawn.
Definitely never withdrawn. I handed in the ID badge on the 9th of March this year.
Now, coming back to that period between 1985 and 1988,
Yes.
when you were first a casino inspector,
Yep.
I'm just going to ask you a series of questions that are directed just to that 3-year period.
Certainly.
And was your work undertaken only at the casino, or did you work at the department's offices as well?
No, we were based at the casino. Essentially, we were an outpost of the main department, and we very rarely went into head office.
And you worked on a roster?
Yes.
And how many inspectors do you recall were rostered on with you?
I was one of the original inspectors. There were 16 of us plus a senior inspector who was based at the casino and worked day shift. So we had 4 teams of 4 inspectors. So each team had 4 on duty at any one time.
And when you say you worked day shift, the roster was such that there were inspectors or a team of inspectors at the casino 24 hours a day?
So the senior inspector at the time worked day shift, but the inspectors worked a rotating roster that 24/7, 365 days of the year.
And did you report to the senior inspector?
Yes,
And the senior inspector oversaw your work?
yes,
And was it Mr. Egan who was the chief casino officer between 85 and 88?
yes. He was also the director of the Casino Control Division.
Thank you. Did you have any interaction with the chief casino officer in the course of your work?
Not on a day-to-day basis, but certainly if Mr. Egan attended the casino, we would discuss matters of interest with him.
Now, you've described that authorisation that you had through your appointment by the chief casino officer.
Yep.
Do you recall if separately from that you had any powers delegated to you by the GWC?
No, I didn't have any.
Or separately any powers delegated by the chief casino officer?
No.
Now, coming back to paragraph 4, at page 0002, you say, I was employed as an inspector, this is just at the very beginning of the paragraph, Mr. Toyne, to inspect, audit and investigate casino gaming activity.
Yep.
Can you explain the difference between an inspection and an audit?
Okay, so inspection might involve watching a dealer deal the game to ensure it was conducted in accordance with the rules and procedures. An audit might be an audit of the main cage, which is the casino bank. For example, we attended the soft count every day. The soft count is the count of money from across the tables, as opposed to the hard count, which is money from gaming machines. We attended both of those activities, and in the soft count, for example, we ticked off every chip credit, chip fill, check credit, all paperwork that had been put down the drop box by the dealer. We ticked them off the transaction report to ensure that all were accounted for. At the end of the soft count, we independently conducted a balance of the money counted, and the cage manager, who was not present during the count of the money, would come into the soft count room and would perform what was known as a buy, where he bought the money off the soft count team, and the government inspector would watch the cage manager do his totting up of the cash, if you like, and then he must balance to the figure we had. Now, whether it was us or him that was out, we didn't leave the room until it balanced.
Now, that process, was that an inspection or an audit?
I would consider that to be an audit.
I see. Now, just to clarify on the soft count, you distinguished between a soft count and a hard count. Hard count is counting the revenue from the electronic gaming machines or EGMs.
Coin.
And the soft count is counting the revenue from the tables.
Yeah.
Does it matter whether that's actually in bill form, money, bills, or chips? It's still called a soft count?
Yes. It's the money that went down the drop boxes across the tables, essentially.
That process that you just described of counting the revenue, what was the purpose of the inspectors auditing that process?
To ensure that revenue was correct for the purpose of reporting the taxable amount.
So the tax payable to the state.
Yes.
Thank you. And you then prepared a report, did you, of that audit?
Well, basically, at the end of the soft count, we would take out a copy of the original copy of the master game report, signed by all the staff, various documents that emanated from that soft count. We wouldn't prepare a report as such, but we would prepare a package of paperwork.
And that paperwork, where did that go after?
That was held in the offices at the casino, because at the end of the month we would have to do an end of month balance, because the money to the state government was paid at the end of the month.
Right. And so you did that end of month reconciliation?
Yes.
And then what happened?
The casino paid its tax.
But in terms of your paperwork?
Oh, the paperwork was retained at the office.
The office of the department?
It may have moved into the head office, I don't know. I only put the information in files at the casino inspectorate offices.
Right. Now,
which was a highly secure office, by the way.
apart from...
At the casino.
Yes.
So that's what you would describe as an part of the audit of the main cage, would you?
It was a daily audit of the soft count.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is different from an audit of the main cage.
Yeah, well, the audit of the main cage may cover a longer period of time. There may be some confusion in the terms. We weren't doing true audits in the sense that an accountant would do a true audit. We were doing daily audits of certain activities.
And what were those activities?
Such as the soft count and the hard count.
And how in your mind did it differ from a normal financial audit?
Well, we weren't trained accountants for a start.
Yes, but when you say it was different, in what way was what you were doing different in your mind from a financial audit?
Well, I mean, we were balancing the revenue each day and counting the revenue each day. So, but it's not what I would call a forensic audit or anything like that.
You weren't looking for any illegal transactions?
We were looking for procedural incorrectness or incorrect activities by the casino, but we certainly weren't looking at the source of money or, yeah.
And why was that? Why weren't you looking for the
Well,
sorry, I'll just finish the question
yeah,
for the
sorry.
transcript. That's fine. Any irregularities in relation to the source of funds?
the source of funds wasn't something that government inspectors were not concerned with, but that wasn't part of our duties.
I think you make reference to this at paragraph 26 of your statement at 0009.
Yeah.
So reminding ourselves that you're talking about the period in 1985.
Yeah.
You weren't the inspectors weren't targeting money laundering directly. In your words, because your understanding was that the federal government wasn't.
Well, at the time, when I made that statement, at the time that in 1985 there was no AUSTRAC, there was no anything like that. The casino wasn't a financial institution in the terms of money laundering legislation today. And where I talk about criminality, we were talking about cheating on the casino floor, theft of chips, collusion between staff and punters. It wasn't a big picture. That was, the police were tasked with that as far as I understood.
Yet there was an understanding even at inspector level in 1985, wasn't there, that casinos such as the Perth Casino were vulnerable to the risk of money laundering?
Yes. Yeah, but that was a police, as far as we were concerned as inspectors, that was a police role.
And did the police have a role in relation to, in 1985, as far as you can recall, in detecting, uncovering money laundering at the Perth Casino?
I'm not sure if they directly had. There was a police casino investigations unit, which may have been tasked with that, but certainly as an inspector I wasn't aware of their specific duties.
So that police casino investigations unit existed from 1985 to your recollection?
Yes.
And what did you understand it did?
Well, it did probity on casino employees. It also looked at the possibility of collusion between casino employees and gamblers, and I understood that it did the big picture items like whether drug money was coming into the casino or anything like that.
Where did you get that understanding from?
Discussions with members of the Police Casino Investigations Unit.
Do you know how big that unit was in 1985?
Originally there was only, I can recall, 2 operational officers coming to the casino, but I don't know how many officers were associated with that unit.
But as far as you were aware, they were dealing with what you call the big picture stuff, which includes money laundering risks and criminal infiltration by organised groups into the casino operations.
Yeah.
Now, just coming back to paragraph 4, we had been talking about audits and the hard count and soft count audit.
Yeah.
So we're back at page 0002. And you talk about, do you see in that second sentence of paragraph 4, audit programs were developed for operational matters?
Yes.
Who developed those audit programs between 85 and 88?
So originally inspectors were, in relation to games audit, originally inspectors were allocated the task of developing an audit program for games audits. As far as I can recall, we had a regulatory section which worked in head office, and the financial stuff was more developed by that section.
All right, and you describe you mention in the next sentence the auditing of games and then the auditing of the main cage. Now, the main cage was the central place at which all of the revenue of the casino was.
Yeah, it's essentially the casino bank.
Counted. There were other cages though, weren't there?
Yeah, there was a cage in the international room.
We'll come back to that in a moment. There was a plaza cage.
Yeah, don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was in 1985. As far as I can recall, there was a cage in the international room and the main cage on the gaming floor.
Just the 2?
Yeah.
Are you aware that there are more cages
Yes,
now?
I am.
What's the purpose of these additional cages?
The one in the international room is to enable patrons within the international room to go and exchange chips for cash. It's more a convenience. Otherwise, I mean, for things like chip fills, for example, took time. So if you had a cage in the international room stocked with chips, then they could do the chip fills on the table.
Just explain a chip fill for me.
Oh, okay, so if a table starts off with a float, as gamblers win, the float gets depleted. So the pit boss in charge of the tables will request a fill to get back to the float value. Likewise, if the gamblers are losing, and now you've got excess chips on the table, they would credit those off so that they weren't carrying excess chips on the table.
So the casino can avail itself of what I'll call generically these satellite cages while they're operating games.
Yes.
And then also the players.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
They can trade cash for chips.
Yeah.
Can they also cash in their chips?
No, well, so a player would trade cash for chips on the table. So he would virtually buy chips at the table. When he wanted to cash those chips in, he would go to the cage.
Now, having cashed out the chips at, say, the International Gaming Facility cage, were the transactions in that cage then brought to account at the main cage?
Yes.
And how did that process occur?
Well, essentially their satellite cages did their own balance. And again, cage manager would verify the information on that balance.
Were the satellite cages, well, I think we're dealing only between 85 and 88 with that international room cage.
Yeah.
Was that audited in the sense of reviewing the soft count? There wouldn't be a hard count, would there?
Oh, there was some gaming machines in it.
All right. Was the hard count and soft count audited in the same way that you've described for the main cage?
The hard count and the soft count was all the revenue off the gaming floor. So drop boxes from the international room were collected and included in the same soft count as the money drop boxes from the main gaming floor.
All right, so there was no accounting as such done at the satellite cage.
Well, they would produce their own reports as to activities within that cage, and it formed part of the source documents that would ultimately be in the soft count.
I understand, but then your audit would be of the main cage, which would then incorporate that.
Absolutely.
Understand. Now, you say also here at the third sentence of 4 that the audit included an audit of junket activity.
Right, so
So I'll just ask a question.
certainly, yeah.
Can you describe how junket activity was audited between 85 and 88?
Yeah. The time I was there, we had very strict control over junket activity in the sense that to qualify for a junket, the representative or the group must have deposited a certain amount of money with the casino prior to commencing their gambling. Inspectors would be present at every buy-in that the junket did. There was no, what you saw on the media of bags of cash. It was all, the money was deposited in the casino bank prior to the players arriving. The junket representative would get what was called check credits, which enabled them to use those check credits to purchase chips at the table. As I say, the inspectors were present at every buy-in and inspectors were present at the junket settlement. So we could see that what they either won or lost was from the initial stake money that they'd been required to deposit with the casino.
And what was the purpose of checking for that? Why was that important?
Well,
So I'll just finish the question.
Yes, certainly.
I'll just explain so that on the transcript we've got a question. and then an answer.
Yeah.
What was the purpose, the importance to the regulator of making sure that what was paid out or paid in matched the funds that had been deposited?
Okay, so junket activity attracted a rebate for the junket players based on their turnover. So let's say, for example, they'd come in with $1 million and they gambled for 24 hours. They may turn over $3 or $4 million on the actual table. They would receive a rebate based on turnover in cash back.
Yes.
So we wanted to ensure that, again, for the purpose of protecting the revenue owed to the state, that they weren't paid over and above that rebate.
And again, I assume that similarly with the purpose of the auditing of the main cage, the function here wasn't also directed towards detecting any criminality, illegality
No.
of funds, money laundering.
No.
I'm sorry, you started that first answer in this section by saying, when I was there. Can you just clarify what you meant by when I was there?
Sorry, during the period 1985 to 1988,
Thank you.
there was strict control over junket activity, gaming activity.
And can you just in a thumbnail sketch, besides these audits of junket activity and the main cage, provide the commissioners with a flavour of the other types, the range of audits that were conducted otherwise in this period 85 to 88?
Well, there was audits of surveillance activity, as in we would make sure that, we would check the supervision levels of the surveillance operation, check, because the principal directions had manning levels, we would check that the manning levels met the requirements of the directions. We would also conduct surveillance of what surveillance was watching, so that in an attempt to ensure that they weren't inappropriately using the surveillance facilities. Likewise, we'd conduct audits of security, manning levels, supervision levels, and there was a element of protection of patrons there to ensure security didn't just beat them up. So it was overall activities at the casino over and above the actual gaming operations. We were looking at the whole operation.
And in broad terms, that was the purpose to which that was directed was one to ensure gaming integrity,
Yes,
and to contrast it with your big picture description of criminal activities such as money laundering and the infiltration of casino operations by organised crime, it was more small picture criminality,
yes,
assaults,
yes.
drunken disorderly behaviour, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and especially with gaming, theft and attempted cheating were quite large issues during the period 1985 to 88.
Now, do you recall how many bank accounts the casino operator had back in 85 to 88?
I wouldn't have been privy to that information.
And when you say you wouldn't have been privy, you didn't have any audit functions in respect of the casino operator's bank accounts at that time?
As far as I was aware, we only looked at the gaming accounts that were directly involved in day-to-day gaming activities.
You say gaming accounts, a ledger of ins and outs in terms
Yes.
of revenue, but
Yeah.
not the bank accounts themselves.
No.
You mentioned the directions a moment ago, and
Yeah.
I'll take you to that,
Yeah.
or those documents. That is GWC.0001.0006.0020.
Yes,
Now, you're familiar with these directions,
yes,
issued under Section 24 of the Casino Control Act.
yes,
And if we go to page 0010, see down at 5.2.
yes.
I'll see if I can extract it. I think that might be the whole paragraph. We'll just look quickly over the page.
No, I think that's it.
Yeah. You'll see there that any officer of the Commission or a person authorised was permitted to inspect at any time records or accounts, including bank account
Yes,
that was directed to be opened under 5.1.
yes.
Yet you say that that wasn't inspected or reviewed during your time as an inspector between 85 and 88.
No, I'm saying the operational inspectors didn't review that. I'm not sure whether the regulatory team or the chief casino officer reviewed those accounts. As I say, we were an outpost based at the Burswood Casino, which now is Crown.
So it's possible that, if I can use this shorthand expression, head office
Yes,
may have, but you have no knowledge of that, whether they did or didn't.
that's right.
Understand. You just cursor back up to clause 4, section 4.1. You see there at 4.1b, at the end of the month, the casino operator had to furnish to the GWC a certified copy of the chip account sheet and the cash account sheet for that month. Was this provided to you?
No, that would have gone to head office.
I see. And reviewed by them.
Yes.
And are you able to say for what purpose it was reviewed by them?
No.
We look at C, a bank reconciliation statement in respect of the Direction 5.1 bank account, showing the balance at the beginning of the month, etc.
Yep.
Were you provided with that reconciliation statement, or did that go to head office? as
Head
well?
office. Yep.
Can I ask you about investigations? Because that's the third function you said you had
Yeah.
as a casino inspector. When was an investigation undertaken?
Well, there could be as simple as attempted cheating or cheating by a patron. There could be a staff member who we either had information or we suspected maybe in collusion with the player. It could be as simple as a patron complaint that we investigated, or you could be assigned a major investigation if there was, depending what the chief casino or / director of the division.
So is it correct to say, if I understand your evidence, that there were two broad circumstances in which an investigation might be initiated? Response to an incident or complaint, so it'd be reactive in that sense.
Yes.
Or alternatively, during just the regular physical inspection of the casino operations, an inspector might see something that he or she thinks, well, that warrants investigation. Yeah,
it may not have just been see something. One of the roles of the original casino inspectors was also to establish a network amongst casino employees. Each employee under the licensing regulations is responsible to ensure that the games are dealt in accordance with the rules and procedures. Now, if a casino employee felt that the rules and procedures were incorrect or were or he was being instructed not to deal by those procedures or rules, then part of our role was to give them some comfort that they could speak to an inspector about it in confidence, and we could either commence an investigation or, say to them, no, that's been approved or whatever.
So integrity of gaming was one purpose for which investigations were undertaken, to protect that?
I'd say the main purpose of the investigations were integrity of gaming.
And that integrity of gaming included that the games were played fairly and in accordance with the rules?
Absolutely.
And were there investigations undertaken in relation to what you and I are describing as the small picture criminality?
Yeah, yes.
And that would be reactive, presumably, when something occurred, an incident arose?
It was mostly reactive. There were some proactive, such as when information was received that international cheats were operating in Australia. Casinos have information of known cheats throughout the world. We had access to that information, so we would be on the lookout for those types of people, if you like.
Where did you get that information from?
In 1985, there was a thing known as the Griffin Book, which casinos throughout the world subscribed to, which was a collation of cheating from around the world and known cheats and known gangs of cheats.
Now, were there ever any investigations into issues pertaining to problem gambling?
I can't say there were. My involvement in problem gambling was problem gambler would ultimately probably get banned from the casino in 1985. Later on, there was an introduction of self-barring, and that's, if you like, where our involvement there might be if the person re-entered. We would try and counsel them. Ultimately, it ended up that when a patron wanted to self-bar, they had to bring in somebody who would act as their guarantor, if you like. And we may be involved in contacting that person to tell them that the problem gambler had been on the casino, located on the casino floor.
Were the inspectors involved in the process of having somebody banned?
No. We were enforcing the provisions of the Act, which said if you re-enter, you're committing an offence.
Do you know who on the regulatory side was involved in the process of having somebody banned?
Well, there's always the power in the Casino Control Act and later on the Gaming Commission, I think, for the Commissioner of Police to ban people from casinos, and the Gaming Commission themselves to ban people from casinos. As far as I understand, those powers were very rarely exercised.
What I'm trying to understand is how those who exercise that power would actually find out, gather information about whether someone was an appropriate person to investigate and begin a process in relation to ban them.
In my experience, that normally was the security manager on duty.
Who is a casino person.
Yes, yeah.
So effectively between 85 and 88, the regulator didn't have any role in relation to ascertaining the sorts of people who should be, or identifying people who should be the subject of a banning order.
No, we did. Yeah, it wasn't our decision to make who should be banned. We reviewed a barring, and if we considered the barring to be incorrect, we would write a report recommending that the barring be overturned.
Did the position of the regulator not being involved in actually instituting a ban, did that ever change in your time with the department?
Not as far as I know, yeah.
If we go back to paragraph 24 at page 0009,
Yeah.
I think over the page there, you're describing, I think, the position that although a casino inspector had the power to issue an infringement notice in respect of a breach of the Casino Control Act or the GWC Act or the regulations, you inspectors rarely actually or never issued an infringement notice yourselves. Is that right?
In relation to casino employees, we regularly issued infringement notices for patrons who were barred and had re-entered, and we could issue infringement notices if we were satisfied that somebody had cheated or attempted to cheat at the casino. But in relation to employees, that was always reported to the Gaming Commission.
See, and what was the reason for that demarcation?
One of the reasons I think is that the infringement notices carried fairly low penalties. I mean, that's a way of dealing with something on the spot. If it was an investigation led to uncovering systemic problems, then the Commission could recommend to the Governor a fine of up to $30,000 at the time. So there was, I suppose, more oomph for the buck.
Yes, which is why it was then referred up the line. Is
Yes.
that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Now, just in terms of the investigations that were undertaken at inspector level,
Yeah.
just give me a brief overview as to how they were typically undertaken.
Well, the inspector on duty would, let's say it's something that involved a patron. Security had security and surveillance. Under the directions, were required to notify the on-duty government inspections upon the detection of illegal activity. And the on-duty government inspector, depending if it was a offence under the Act, would then become the investigating officer. In practice, we allowed the casino to conduct the interview, and we would seek clarification of any matters that were that we felt were not covered in the interview, and we would want to satisfy ourselves that the elements of the offences were proven before we took any action.
Was anybody on the regulatory side present when the casino operator conducted the interview?
Most times we were present.
What was the reason for having the casino operator conduct the interview?
Well, in the first instance, security was responsible for the overall operation of the casino, and therefore they were responsible for detection of illegal acts and taking action once those acts were detected. Our role was to ensure that they just didn't turn a blind eye to or take summary justice. So our role was to ensure that they did conduct the investigation properly. In practice, quite often, it would involve a discussion between the government inspector and the security manager.
So, and sometimes it would lead to either being referred to higher ups in the department or the issuing of an infringement notice by an inspector, and other times not.
Yeah, so the security manager would conduct their interview and take their action. The casino inspector would report to the senior inspector whether the action taken was correct. If it was deemed that it wasn't correct, then we may conduct further investigations and make other recommendations to the Gaming and Wagering Commission.
Now, I wanted to come to your CV and ask you about your acting roles.
Yeah.
So if we go to dlg.001.004.001, this is the page 0003. So this is one of the pages of your CV, you recall it?
Yeah.
You catalogue here on this page all of the acting roles you had during your time with the department.
Yes.
And the date periods are very specific.
Yeah.
So how did you compile that list?
Basically, I asked for records from our Human Resources Department.
For the purposes of presenting this to the Royal Commission, or was it something prepared earlier?
It was something prepared earlier.
How accurate is it, do you think?
It was accurate at the time that I produced it. I don't know how. As I've retired, I don't have access to the HR records of the department.
Now, you see there's an assistant director gaming.
Yes.
Between November and December that you held the acting role for.
Yes.
What did that job entail?
Well, that was it. At the time, the gaming division, I think, was still separate. So that was managing the inspectors, providing policy advice and such like to the director of gaming.
In relation to casino regulation?
No.
Or not? I understand. And when you were doing that role, you weren't involved in casino regulation at
That's
all?
correct.
Understand. Now we leap forward to 1991 because of you were then a gaming inspector without casino involvement from 1988 through to 1991.
Yeah.
And then we get to your role of gaming investigator between 1991 and 1993. I'm going to ask you questions directed to just that 2 to 3 year period there.
Yeah.
So were you involved in any casino regulation at this point?
I may have been. I can't exactly remember the dates that we got so-called multi-skilled.
What do you mean? Like there was an amalgamation?
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
And it may have included this period?
Yes.
But you can't be sure?
Yeah, I can't be sure.
Do you have any recollection of acting exclusively on the investigation side in relation to casino, the Perth casino?
I think during the period that I was acting assistant director gaming, I didn't have anything to do with the casino. I went back to the casino in '93 as a supervising government casino inspector, and that was when I became again involved in casino work.
You say supervising government
Casino inspector.
casino inspector. If we just cursor back to page 2, I think it is, 0002, there we go. You've listed there at the bottom your career history.
Yeah.
You've got gaming investigator, do you see there 91 to 93?
Yeah.
And then you have a role of compliance inspector.
Yeah.
So that's different from the title that you just explained.
That's when we'd been amalgamated. Like I said, they kept having restructures and changing the name of the position.
So compliance inspector, or what was the other term you used?
Okay, so under the Casino Control Division, there was government casino inspectors and there was supervising government casino inspectors. So in the team of 4, the government casino inspectors were level 3s and a supervising government casino inspector was responsible for the supervision of that team, and they were level 4s.
And how did that correlate to the compliance inspector role that you've written down here?
So by the time, once we got amalgamated, the level 3s got upgraded to a level 4, so there was no difference between the inspectors, and the compliance inspector then was doing community gaming, casino work and racing work, I believe.
but essentially supervising other inspectors.
No, we all became level 4s, so you're just one of the team.
All right. So when were you a supervising government casino inspector?
In 1993,
Until when?
until we got amalgamated into one division.
Was that in about 2005?
No, it was a long time before that.
About when?
Maybe it was 2005 after Mr. Sargent became the Director General.
Do you remember how many years approximately you were supervising government casino inspector?
Maybe 1 or 2 before that happened.
You started in 93, so that would put it at around 95.
Yeah, right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
All right, so your supervising government casino inspector still based at the casino,
Yes,
and now you're in charge of a team rather than being part of a team that's supervised by somebody else. You're doing the supervising.
yes.
And we're now a few years down the road from when you were last in a casino inspector in 88.
Yes.
And has anything changed in terms of the nature of the inspection, audit and investigation function?
Sorry, what are you talking about now?
So it's 93 to 95.
Yeah. No, it hadn't, no.
So all fairly much the same.
Yeah, around about 95, we started the process of looking at the involvement of government inspectors, casino inspectors in the day-to-day activities of the casino.
And whether or not they should be there 24/7.
That was after 95.
Right, so you said at around 95 looking at their involvement.
Yeah, so for example, prior to 95, we held the stock of cards and stock of equipment, and we issued it on a daily basis to the gaming shift manager. After that period, the casino held the stock of equipment. We held the keys to the locked area. So instead of being responsible for the total stock, we made sure that they couldn't get access without us unlocking the door.
And so that was to preserve the integrity of
Absolutely.
the games that were being played.
Yes,
No one could tamper with cards or anything like that.
yes,
Understand. So at the end of 95, do I understand correctly, you then move into your compliance inspector role?
yeah, around about there, yeah. It's hard to remember, there's that many of these structures.
Yeah, so we're talking 20 years or so ago,
Yeah,
15, 20 years ago, right. Now, was this a product of the amalgamation of different work streams within the department?
Yeah.
And was that putting liquor and gaming together?
That was later,
Right, so this is just putting all gaming together, is it?
yes.
And racing?
Yeah, our involvement in racing was generally, we conducted counts of TABs. What we were looking for there was, again, credit betting and betting by employees. So we would turn up unannounced to a TAB agency, and you can print out what the money they should have on the premises in real time, and we would count the money to ensure they weren't giving credit to patrons and such like.
All right, thank you. Now coming back to casino regulation, as a compliance inspector, were you still based at the casino?
No,
So you had moved to
head office.
head office.
Yeah.
So what was your interaction with or more broadly, your role in relation to compliance inspection?
Okay, so when we were amalgamated, if you like, you would rotate through, you would do community gaming for a period of time, and then you would be based at the casinos as an inspector for a period of time.
Oh, I see. So when you were involved in casino regulation, you were based at the casino?
Yes.
Understand. From about 2002, they reduced slightly the roster, didn't they? So
Yes.
that inspectors weren't there 24/7.
Yeah,
They clocked off at 3 in the morning and
Yes.
came back at 7:30 the
Yeah.
next day. but still every day of the year?
Yes.
And were the same number of inspectors rostered on each time?
No.
4 inspectors?
No.
How many now?
2.
So if you were in charge of an inspection team, a roster at the casino, were there 2 plus you or just you and one other?
No, so by the time we were compliance inspectors, there was no longer supervising inspectors.
I see.
So as the senior inspector of compliance, I was responsible for the roster, and I would, but the parameter was only 2 inspectors at the casino, so you would roster your resources accordingly.
So when you were rostered on, it was you and one other?
Yes.
Understand. What was the reason, do you know, for the reduction from 4 to 2?
Yeah, I do know. So in about 1996 or around about there, I was given a project of reviewing the principal directions with the brief of removing casino inspectors from the day-to-day activities in the casino. So, for example, an audit program was to develop for the soft camp, and inspectors no longer attended the soft camp. Gaming equipment was handed over to the casino, so there was not as much need for the same number of inspectors. So our activity, as in day-to-day operational involvement, was being reduced.
Why was that?
I can only offer you my opinion on that.
An impression?
An impression, the department was taking on additional roles and limited resources so as to enable the department to meet its responsibilities.
So it's a resourcing issue?
Yes.
As far as you could ascertain?
Yes.
But to be fair, no one ever said that to you.
That's right.
I'm asking for an impression again from you, Mr.
Yep.
Toyne.
Yep.
Between 1985, when you first came on board as a casino inspector,
Yep.
through to towards the end of this period as a compliance inspector in the mid-2000s,
Yes.
would you say there was any shift in approach by the regulator to casino regulation?
Once we started reducing our day-to-day operational involvement, I think there was a change in approach to the casino operator.
Can you describe that change for me?
I'd say there was a greater emphasis on customer service rather than regulation.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, so for example, in 1985, government casino inspectors, when the money was going to be collected off the tables, which is the drop box collection, government inspectors followed that collection around, issued keys for the drop boxes, and made sure every drop box was collected off every table. It was pretty inconvenient to the casino operator. They had to wait for us if we were involved in other activities, and it was a regulatory burden that was placed on them. By the time where you pointed out that we were only there till 3 o'clock in the morning, we no longer performed that function. So there was a reduction in the type of hands-on regulatory approach, if you like.
So when you used that expression of, your impression was that there became a greater emphasis on customer service. The customer you're identifying here is the casino operator.
Absolutely.
You say absolutely. Did you have an impression that that was how the regulator saw the casino operator, as its customer?
It was beginning to move that way, yes.
And sorry, are we talking here around 2002?
It started earlier than that, but yeah, 2002 would be...
Would you say... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was asked to review the principal directions in about 96 or 98, so the move away from hands-on regulation was starting then.
I might just ask you to elaborate on that a little more. So in the mid-1990s, as you recall, you think it was around 1996, the directions that we were looking at a little while ago, you were asked by whom to review?
Well, by my a Director of Operations, David Howge, who'd been asked by the CEO, as far as I was aware.
CEO of the department.
Yeah,
I understand. And can you remember who that was?
Perry Sargent.
I see. And you were given a guidance as to how you were to review the directions and for what purpose?
I was given instruction that the purpose was to remove casino inspectors from day-to-day involvement in operational matters.
And were you told why?
No.
And just coming back to at the later point in time, and Commissioner Owen asked you about whether this customer service orientation was around 2002 or later. I was putting it to you about the mid-2000s. Is it a better way to look at it that it was a gradual process?
Yes.
From about the mid-1990s?
Late 1990s.
Late 1990s.
Yeah.
Where, is this fair? Increasingly, the attitude of the regulator was to emphasise service to the casino operator, to reduce inconvenience to it.
In certain aspects, yeah.
So, over and above prioritising, maintaining the integrity of the gaming, and small picture criminality, that sort of thing.
Integrity of gaming was always our main focus. If anything, my impression it was to reduce the burden on the casino operator.
But did that come at an expense, the expense of something else in your view?
In my view, it lessened the regulatory control that the department/commission had over the activities at the casino.
Can you be a little more specific about in what respects it lessened the regulatory control?
Well, the example I can give is ultimately, in relation to electronic gaming machines, in 1985, government inspectors used to seal the CPU board within an electronic gaming machine. Yeah. Okay, so the cabinet of an electronic gaming machine is not the important thing. What's important are the microchips which control how the game is played and the return to player. So in 1985, if a video technician accessed the video machine, it was sealed by a government inspector. At the time of him accessing, if he wanted to get into the central processing unit, a government inspector would break the seal. We would ensure that it was the same seal that had been placed on last time, and we would stand there and watch, albeit we might not know what he's doing, we would stand there and watch the video technician perform his duties. If he went into the CPU board, at the end of his job, we would take the master gaming EEPROM, which is the chip, and we would take the EEPROM from the gaming machine and compare it to masters we had in our office, and they had to match. Now, and when we started moving away, the sealing of video machines was handed over to the casino, and I'm not sure that the only comfort that I can think it gives is the casino operator at the moment, that a patron hasn't accessed the casino and changed the chips over. I don't see that the regulator can take a lot of comfort in the fact that the machine hasn't been accessed inappropriately.
In particular, by or on behalf of the casino operator,
Yes.
do you mean? Yes. So that's one example that you give in relation to EGMs. Was there any relaxation, do you recall, or did you have the impression of any relaxation of procedures in relation to the hard and soft count? Just to clarify, understanding that the inspectors no longer actually physically observed that process.
Yeah. We still observed the process using surveillance cameras, and we were getting the source documents at the end of the count. So in relation to the audit programs developed for the soft count, I think there was reasonable satisfaction at that time that we were getting a true picture of revenue.
So just at that time, to be clear, is through the 1990s and the early 2000s.
Yes.
Right. Now, did the auditing of the hard and soft count, and we might say auditing of revenue generally, did that change in any way due to the advent of an increasing use of electronic transactions to move money?
Well, again, say with junket activity, most junket money was deposited by way of electronic funds transfer.
In any event,
Yeah, there was never bags of cash, and it just didn't happen.
but what about the local gaming?
Um,
So people paying by cards, for example.
to buy chips and things,
Yes.
yeah, I don't think they could, because that credit card. So, in fact, there was a gaming commission policy. There was ATMs at the casino, but the ATMs had to be 400 metres from the gaming floor. So a person could, and they weren't located on the gaming floor. So a person could go and get money out of an ATM, but part of the logic behind them being located that distance was to give the patron a chance to think about what he was doing before he took his money out.
Pause for reflection.
Yeah,
And was there also a daily limit on the ATM?
I believe there was. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I believe there was.
So, in substance, you'd say that notwithstanding out there in the wider community, over the 1990s and early 2000s, the increasing use of electronic transactions, that didn't affect local casino gaming.
No.
Right. And in so far as you continued to be involved in casino regulation after the early 2000s, did that ever change subsequently? People using debit cards, for example.
The only thing I can recall, and this is discussion with other inspectors, is in these unprecedented COVID times, they have allowed patrons to get money from FPOS machines on the gaming tables and at the bars.
But that's a very recent advent, obviously.
Yes.
So we've talked about EGMs and we've talked about revenue counting.
Yes.
Did, in this period of time from 1985 and then through the 90s and early 2000s, did the audit programs change in other ways that are substantial or material?
It less and less involved the participation of the casino inspectors in framing the audit programs, and more revolved around a central regulatory unit that was in head office.
Was your impression or your view that the audit programs suffered for that lack of involvement by the on-the-ground inspectors?
It may sound like an elitist opinion, but they weren't. The people who were writing the audit programs weren't experienced casino inspectors.
Is your point that if you haven't actually seen how the casino operates in practice, it's less likely that an audit program will be as relevant as it should be?
Yes.
And has that position ever changed to your knowledge, and understanding that you probably only have relevant knowledge of the regulation of the casino up until 2012, but up until that point, were the audit programs, the move was to just have them developed at head office?
Yes.
Compared to 1985, when you were back there on the casino floor
Yep.
in 90s and 2000s, was there a change in how junket activity was audited?
Well, we no longer attended the buys or anything like that.
And why not?
And that was part of the removal of involvement in operational activity.
So was there any auditing of junket activity in this later period?
There may have been some by individual inspectors.
But on an ad hoc basis?
Yes.
What about the inspection or auditing of bank accounts? Did that begin? I recall you saying that didn't happen in the 80s.
I wouldn't be able to say.
because you can't remember, or
It didn't involve the inspectors.
I see. And in this 90s, early 2000s period, to your knowledge, was the regulator starting to think of money laundering as a more direct risk that was arising in relation to the Perth casino operations?
No, there was more a belief that it was the responsibility of other law enforcement bodies.
And were investigations continued to be undertaken in much the same way as they had in the 80s?
Yes.
Now, this amalgamation with the liquor division
Yes.
of the department, about when do you recall that occurring?
Okay, so the Liquor Control Act was amended in about 2005 to include responsible service of alcohol provisions and training requirements for staff involved in the service of liquor. As far as I recall, there was a commitment by the government to provide a stronger enforcement presence, and that's when the inspectors that had previously just done gaming work were multi-skilled to do liquor work as well.
That included you.
Yes.
And if we go to paragraph 13 of your witness statement at page 0005, is it in that context that you make the comment that you do at 13? So this is at around 2005 and subsequently, that it became harder to discharge all your functions as inspector adequately?
Yeah, there was several problems in that. In my opinion, training wasn't provided at the level that we had in 1985 and probably needed. The biggest problem was, 1 minute you're doing liquor work and gaming work and then you're at the casino. When your time ended at the casino, any investigation you're involved in would be handed over to another inspector. So
you were disrupted in the investigations were disrupted,
yeah,
which is not helpful.
Yeah, and also I felt that that way of rotating inspectors detracted from the skill levels of the inspectors.
I think that's the point you make at 18, if I understand what you're saying there, that because an individual inspector had to be skilled across a range of regulatory areas, that had a sort of a lowest common denominator effect, if you will.
Yeah, the way I used to put it is we became jack of all trades and masters of none, in the sense that, in my opinion, there's a particular set of skill sets to do with a casino inspector, and you need to hone those skills all the time. For example, when I first started, you were expected to watch a dealer make a payout on a roulette table and to be able to calculate what should be the correct payout prior to the dealer making the payout. Now, if you're not at the casino all the time, you lose that edge, and the dealers every day, they're increasing their skill level and increasing the speed that they deal those games. Likewise with the surveillance system, it was a very short period of time where your skill level at manipulating the surveillance system and calling up the correct cameras would start to fade. So every time you went back to the casino, it was almost like a relearning experience.
So there's inefficiencies there as well as missing things.
Yes.
Can I come back to what you were saying about the training?
Yep.
In relation to casino regulation? You felt that had come off, it wasn't as good as it used to be?
Well, when I first started in 85, we had 3 months dedicated training. We had, believe it or not, we had a casino set up at the Hyatt Centre, and the inspectors were trained in each game, how to deal with the games. The inspectors were shown cheating techniques, and it was full-on intense training. So by the end of that period of time, we were pretty proficient in all the games. Subsequent to that, the department would do on-the-job training. So as a supervising government casino inspector, if a new inspector was employed, I was responsible to train that person in the games and whatever. I just didn't think it was as good as the full-on training that we'd had in the beginning. When the inspectorates were amalgamated, we lost a fair amount of casino inspectors that didn't want to do work outside the casino. So that knowledge base left, and I don't think we've ever recovered it.
When did they actually drop off the 3-month training?
It never happened after the first intake.
And the on-the-job training diminished, are you saying, with the amalgamation?
Well, it was never as extensive as the training that I received as an initial government inspector.
And presumably if people were on the job less at the casino anyway, then their on-the-job training would be less.
Absolutely.
And so is your impression that by the mid-2000s, casino inspectors just weren't as skilled as they were originally?
Yes,
To a significant degree?
I would say so.
Just to finish off on this little section here, Mr. Toyne, in your position as compliance inspector during the 2000s, who did you report to within the department?
I would have reported to Assistant Director Gaming.
And did you have any interaction with the Chief Casino Officer in the course of your work?
During the period that Mr. Howard was the Director of the Operations Division and the Chief Casino Officer, he was a very approachable director, and any inspector could walk into his office and discuss matters with him. Generally speaking, we interacted with the Assistant Director Gaming, Manager Inspections, whatever his title was at the time.
So I'm gathering from what you're saying that Mr. Howard was someone who was very approachable in
Absolutely.
that role, but perhaps others either side of him not so much.
Absolutely.
Right. And in what circumstances would you approach Mr. Howard to discuss matters with him?
If I discussed something with Mr. Howard, I'd already discussed it with my immediate supervisor, and it may be as a response to a question from Mr. Howard, or it may be a matter I felt
A concern.
a concern about that I would discuss it with him, and it may be procedures, it may be manning levels, or it may be as simple as activities of security officers.
But, all right. Now, did you have any powers delegated to you by the GWC, to your knowledge, during
No,
this time?
no.
Or by the Chief Casino Officer?
No, I only had the powers that came with being an authorised officer.
And if just quickly we can look at your CV again, just a couple of quick questions and then we can...
Yeah,
So that's DLG.0001, there we are, looking at your acting roles at 0003. Just for the transcript, I'll just read out that document number, DLG.001.004.001_0003. And I'm looking at this, the period between 1993 and 2006.
yeah,
I think you've already explained your role as senior investigator gaming. Maybe you haven't. Do you see there you've got supervising government casino inspector in 1993?
yeah.
So that's not an acting role?
That would have been then, yes.
All right. And then senior investigator gaming, what was that role?
That was essentially supervisor of the team of inspectors that were assigned in the gaming area.
Right. And in 1994, that didn't include casino regulation.
Oh, geez, I can't recall.
Right. Director of gaming.
Director of gaming would have been the... It may have been that then they were still separate divisions, because Director of gaming would have been in charge of community gaming.
All right. Dropping down to supervising regulatory officer in 96.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what that title related to. No, I couldn't say.
All right. That's a convenient time.
Right, we'll resume at 11:35. Thank you.
All rise.
Please be seated. Thank you, Mr. Twain. Ms. Gale.
Next topic, Mr. Twain. I've just got two questions that occurred to me over the break. Can I take you back to what you were saying about the in that early period in the 80s where you were observing the hard and soft count, and you were saying that in relation to the daily reconciliation in the main cage, the paperwork that the inspectors prepared was housed at the casino.
Yeah, it may have gone to head office. I'm not. I put it in files at the casino. The senior inspector may have forwarded it on to head office. I wasn't sure of that.
What about at the month's end when that monthly reconciliation was done? The paperwork that the inspectors had from that, what happened to that?
That probably went to head office.
Why do you say probably?
Because that was the magic figure of the casino tax. They would want to know that.
Thank you. Now, another question, but on a different topic. When you were describing the change over the period of time from the mid-80s through to the 90s and early 2000s, that removal of the inspectors from much of the actual physical observation of the operations on the casino premises, you were describing how there was a substitution by way of looking at surveillance material to a degree. Where was the surveillance equipment where was that located that the inspectors were using?
Okay, so in 1985, the top floor of the casino was divided into two halves. One was the casino surveillance facility and one was a matching surveillance facility that we had. We had our own surveillance monitor room, so we could independently control cameras and do our own taping and whatever.
So that was in the 80s?
Yes.
And then that room that the regulator had, that room was maintained through the 80s, 90s and 2000s?
Yeah, I can't remember what year, but sometime in the early 2000s, maybe it was around about 2012, the current surveillance or government inspector's office is located on the basement level of the casino next to staff entry. Contains a surveillance facility, but nowhere near as big as the one we had previously.
Let me just understand that. So you date that at around 2012.
Yeah.
That would put you towards the end of your involvement with casino regulation.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
Yeah, yep.
And you were saying it's not as big now, the surveillance equipment.
I mean, it's probably, sorry.
First of all, you
Yep.
demoted to the basement. That's the first. Yes?
So the surveillance
Sorry,
equipment
it
that,
went down to the basement.
yes.
And then can you just describe in general terms the surveillance equipment that you had up on that top floor before 2012 or thereabouts?
Well, it was a mirror image of the surveillance equipment that the casino had. Yeah.
Right, and that involved multiple screens?
Yes.
About how many?
8, 9 maybe.
Did it enable the user to observe every room of the casino?
If we wanted to, not at
once.
not at once, no. But we could set a camera to scroll through. So, for example, at night time there would be no need to be watching the soft count room because the count occurred from 7 o'clock in the morning. But obviously at night time when the games are when the casino's packed, there's more tables to watch because more tables are open. So we had a choice of programming whatever we wanted, really.
So you could watch any part of the casino that you wanted to
Yes.
under that original surveillance arrangement.
Yes.
Now, what was the situation when you moved to the basement?
It still has that capability for us to look at. It's a smaller version, but it's the same capability. I don't know if it's got as many screens as it had before.
And is it better, worse, or no different in terms of its utility?
The difference that I see now is that if we want to tape for evidence, we go to the casino operator and ask them to dub us a tape, whereas previously in 85 we would make our own copies.
And so you can see in real time what's happening, but it doesn't record.
It has the capability to record, but it's just policy and procedure that we obtained evidential tapes via the casino operator.
So that's changed, has it?
Yes.
Do you know the reason for that change?
No.
Sorry, Ms Cahill, could I just ask a question of it, just whilst we're on that? So my understanding is that at some point the inspectors no longer spent 20 or 24 hours a day at the casino.
Yes.
So there aren't always inspectors in the basement, are there?
No. Oh, well, when I was there, we reduced the shifts down to, or the time that we were on the premises down to, example, 3 o'clock. Now it's a case of inspectors are not there every day. They're sent out there for specific tasks.
So is that the only surveillance facility that the regulator has, the one in the basement?
When I say it's classified as the basement, but it's the undercroft parking level. So as far as the staff are concerned, it's the ground level that they walk into the casino. But yes, that's the only. However, we can go and view their surveillance facility at any time.
But you don't have the capacity to sit in head office
No.
and view what's happening
No.
at the casino.
No.
That's what I wanted to find out. Thank you, Ms Kay.
Commissioner Ryan, I'm just going to tender the directions. I'm not sure that they've been tendered before. GWC.001.0006020 to the casino directions.
The Birthwood Casino directions, GWC.0001.006.0020 are admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now I'm going to come to the period that the last period of your involvement with casino regulation at the department, Mr. Toyne, and that's between 2006 and 2012 when you were Senior Inspector Compliance.
Yep.
So these questions are directed towards that time period. So now you're in this role, you're not based at the casino at all, is that right?
That's right.
And if we pull up this document, GWC.0002.002.0044, this is the job description for that role,
Yes.
and you recognise that document.
Yes.
You can see from that little flowchart there, you're one of 3 senior inspectors compliance.
Yes.
There were obviously therefore two others
Yes.
at the time that you held that role.
Yes.
Who were they?
One was Mr. Lee Radis and one was Mr. Santo Menino.
Thank you. Now, the Director of Compliance was the person to whom the 3 of you reported.
Yes.
Was that Mr. Mick Connolly at the time?
Sorry, what date are we talking?
So I'll break it up. So sort of 06, 07 when you started in that role.
So 06, 07 it would have been Mr. David Howge. Subsequent to that it was Mr. Mick Connolly.
Then he went away, because you remember I'm talking to you
Yeah.
about the period of 06 to 12. He went away to fisheries, didn't he, at around 2010?
Yes.
So do you remember who filled the role after him?
Director of Compliance. I know in 2012 it was advertised and another gentleman came in. It may have been somebody acting in the position, I'm not sure.
Now, these 3 senior inspectors compliance, did you all do the same job, or did you have different roles?
Okay, so one was Senior Inspector Compliance Gaming, one was Senior Inspector Compliance Liquor, and one was Senior Inspector Compliance Casino.
And you were, which one?
Well, I did all 3 at some period because we rotated through the positions.
I see. So you weren't given fixed roles, casino, gaming and liquor.
No.
The idea was that you rotated through those positions.
Yes.
For how long a period of time was each rotation?
To begin with, it wasn't a specific rotation. It was basically, I think we probably lasted 6 months to a year before we got rotated.
And is there any, was there any record, do you remember, being kept about when you were in which rotated role?
There may have been, I'm not certain.
All right, now coming back to the job description, you just see down the bottom of the page, the front page that we're on, that's section 3, role and purpose. You got that there, just down the bottom of the page?
Yeah.
And it describes the role and purpose, as it says,
Yeah.
by reference to or for the purpose of meeting the business objectives of the compliance division.
Yes.
Do you know what the business objectives of the compliance division were between 2006 and 2012?
The regulation of lawful gaming and liquor activities.
Were you ever given any more detailed description of the business objectives?
There was a business plan that was available.
In 2006?
I think so.
And prepared by the department
Yes.
at a higher level than
Yeah.
you were?
Yeah.
And do you remember the content of it?
Well, basically, it was what I saw and was involved in was KPIs, key performance indicators.
If we go over the page of this job description form, and we're into section 4, statement of key products and services.
Yeah.
The first heading there is coordination, so you had to basically manage and coordinate all of the inspectors.
Yes.
Did it work that when you're each in your different rotations, if say you were in your casino rotation role, you'd coordinate the casino inspectors, somebody else would, another one of the inspectors would coordinate the liquor inspectors, for example, and so on?
Yeah, except for the rostering, there was one roster that was common across the three.
And do you see under the next heading, compliance audit inspection investigation programs?
Yeah.
Development and continuous review of audit and inspection programs?
Yes.
That was something that you did in your role?
Yes, although I'd say that the senior inspector's role was more the continuous review of audit programs rather than the development of them.
How do you distinguish between those two functions?
Okay, so if an inspector conducted an audit program in the field and felt that it wasn't relevant or parts of it weren't relevant, we would document those, put them to their regulatory area.
Who do you mean when you say regulatory area?
Well, they developed a regulatory section which basically did things like when legislation was being amended, they prepared the legislation. It took on the role of gatekeeper of the audit programs, if you like.
Was that the licensing stream?
It was more attached to the policy branch than...
So were there three broad streams in this regulatory part of the department at this stage? Policy, compliance and licensing?
Yes.
Policies, you think, where the development of audit programs
Well, they were called
focused?
They were called regulatory officers, but they were sat in the same area and were attached to the policy
What was
area.
the distinction between the compliance and licensing streams?
So compliance and licensing. So licensing would only be concerned with issuing approvals.
So approvals for casino employees,
Yes.
junket approvals?
Yeah, they would by then. It was By 2006, the junket approval process was more a paperwork exercise than a hands-on interview, and
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But by 2006, when you had this separate licensing stream as opposed to the compliance stream, were junket approvals handled by licensing or compliance?
the actual approvals were handled by licensing. The legwork, if you like, to do with interviews and such like, were handled by compliance inspectors.
People like you?
Yes.
Or people you were supervising?
Yes,
Which or both?
both.
So you reviewed audit and inspection programs, and if they required improvement or development, that went to the policy stream.
Yes,
So you were just identifying the problems, not finding the solutions. Can I put it that way? For
Well, we might-
issues with audit programs and inspection programs.
yeah, we may recommend a solution, or we may say this is no longer relevant, for example.
But the decision about whether to change the audit or inspection program lay elsewhere.
Yes.
In the policy stream.
Yeah, yes.
Now, if the second dot point under this compliance audit, etc., heading says identification of significant regulatory risks and the development of appropriate risk treatment plans. Is that something that you did in your role?
We might identify regulatory risks, but we didn't develop appropriate treatment plans. No. And I will state that none of the senior inspector compliance ever went on a training course for risk assessment.
But you did understand it to be part of your role to identify significant regulatory risks.
Yes,
Now, money laundering was a known regulatory risk at this time in relation to casinos.
yes.
And was that something that you identified in the course of this role as a regulatory risk?
Well, it had already been identified, but as far as the department was concerned, that was a police and other law enforcement bodies' role.
So that's the point that you make at 26 and 27 of your witness statement. By the time you get into the mid 2000s, the sense is, well, we've got the AUSTRAC legislation and we've got WAPOL, and those are the agencies that have the remit to investigate those sorts of activities.
Yeah, and some of the audit programs reminded you of that. There was a statement in them.
I see. And to actually not investigate these things.
But it wasn't our role.
I see. And that position that you've expressed at 26 and 27, particularly 27, where you say, well, that wasn't our remit. You say you saw it in the audit programs. Who was setting that agenda within the department? At your level or higher up?
Yeah.
And where higher up?
Director and CEO level. I'd say CEO.
Director General, do you mean? Or?
Sorry, yeah, Director General, yeah.
And when you say CEO, was there a CEO of the department at this time?
I was Director General.
I see.
You get confused with the vernacular of private enterprise and government
That
sometimes.
was Mr. Sargent, is that
Yes.
who we're referring to?
Yes,
So is the consequence that in relation to a money laundering risk, there were, to your knowledge, no treatment plans developed to address that risk?
yes.
Commissioner, I'll just tender the job description. That's GWC.0002.002.0004.
The job description form with the document identifier that Ms Cale has just read out is admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
Now, can I take you to a page of the casino manual at GWC.001.0013.0006 _0006. You're familiar with the casino
Yes.
manual? And here we are at paragraph 1.5, referring to the I'll call it shorthand, the AML Act, the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act. The Casino Manual identifies that the casino must maintain an anti-money laundering program, and which includes the reporting of cash transactions and detecting and reporting conduct which may be suspicious in nature. Do you know, or can you recall when that requirement was introduced into the casino manual?
Oh, it would have been shortly after the Act was proclaimed.
You're inferring that, but you don't know.
No, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Ms. Cale, can I just make a point here? I suspect that between now and November, the Casino Operating Manual is going to figure in various guises, and there are various versions of it. It might be important, I think, if we specify the version when it's each time it's referred to. I know this one's February to 2021.
Yes. So I'll be clear on the record that I'm referring to the version as at 23 February 2021, and the question is directed towards whether you knew or could offer a substantiated view about when that requirement in paragraph 1.5 was introduced.
No, I can't. No.
But your best guess, if I can put it this way, is at the time that the AML legislation came in.
Or shortly after, yeah.
Do you know if this requirement to maintain an AML program, which included A and B, was ever audited by the regulator?
I don't know if it was ever audited, but I know that we were aware of it, and that it was discussed at casino operations meetings at high level.
In what respect? Do you mean in meetings with the operator?
Yeah, as far as their requirement to report went, yes.
And what was the nature of the discussion?
I only went to a couple of those meetings, but it was, their obligations to report that suspect transactions and whatever.
But you were never involved in auditing that requirement?
No.
And you don't know if it ever was audited?
Yeah, I don't know if it was ever audited.
By others, yes. Commissioner, I'll tend to just that. Just the page. I was just going to tender that single page.
The document, which is a part of the casino manual operations, which has the identifier number GWC.0001.0013.002 something 6 underscore 0006 is admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
Pardon? Oh, sorry, and I need page 7. Thank you, Ms. Seawood, because it goes over the page.
00_006 and _007.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now I'm going to go to a different document, but with almost the same Bates number, GWC.001.0027_0006. So here we have a page from the Casino Operations Manual, effective as at 10 June 2019. And I'm taking you to paragraph 2.1, which provides for, in terms, the operator to detect and report suspicious transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, do you know if that requirement was ever audited by the regulator?
Yeah, I don't know. These questions may be more appropriately asked of the current manager compliance, Mr Radis?
So,
To my knowledge, he wasn't.
so Commissioner, I tender those 2 pages.
The 2 pages from the casino manual operations with the identifiers GWC.0001.0013.0027_006 and 0007 are admitted into evidence as an exhibit.
Now, I'm going to come back to the February 21 version, but at a different page, Mr Toyne. GWC.0001.0026_0011. Now, at the bottom, 4.2, foreign currency redemption, that box there effectively provides a procedure for a patron to buy back the foreign currency that they've brought into the casino for the purpose of gaming. Do you recall whether that was part of the casino manual when you had your role as compliance inspector?
I don't recall, but I would imagine it would be, because they had the ability to do that from day one.
And throughout the time that you were involved in casino regulation, they retained that ability?
Yes.
Did it ever occur to you that it might create the opportunity for money laundering to take place?
Not really, because as far as I was concerned, the only money they'd be buying back their foreign currency with would be money they won on the gaming tables.
But if the money that they originally put in was money from criminal proceeds?
Well, we wouldn't have known that. Yeah.
Did it occur to you at the time that the ability to buy back their foreign currency might facilitate money laundering?
No.
Does it occur to you now?
The casino will only give people winners checks if they win money. They track their players, because for 2 purposes. One is to ensure they're only going to get paid out their winnings, and secondly, they may wish to encourage that player to come back in future, join the international room, whatever. So without collusion between senior management and the patron, I can't say that it's that easy to launder money at a casino.
Well, it depends, doesn't it, what checks are placed on understanding the source of the monies that are the foreign monies that are paid in initially to the casino,
I'd agree.
isn't it?
I'd agree with you. As far as an inspector's concerned, our job was to verify that before the casino started giving them junket rebate programs, that the money was actually deposited. The source of the funds was never something that the inspectors were involved in.
And is that again because it was basically considered the remit of other agencies, AUSTRAC and WAPOL, to look into, detect, investigate the source of funds being paid in? Now, separately from money laundering, criminal associations with junket operators was a known regulatory risk between 2006 and 2012, wasn't it?
Yes.
Did you develop any treatment plan for that risk?
Again, that was considered the remit of police.
On what basis?
Well, number one, we wouldn't have information as to who was a criminal and who wasn't.
You could obtain information about a junket operator, though, couldn't you?
Only the information that the junket operator provided to us.
Well, there was Section 25 capital A, wasn't there? Regulations could be passed in order to permit information to be obtained from junket operators.
Yeah, the regulations were there, and I was involved in interviews of junket operators, but the quality of information that was given to us, we really had no way of checking unless the police checked it.
Did you ever suggest or consider developing a treatment plan that proposed that further regulations be promulgated to obtain more detailed information from the junket operators?
Personally, no, I didn't, but I was aware that the junket regulations were going, at one stage, were going to be repealed.
But before then?
When I did a review of the directions, because prior to the regulations coming into existence, the directions were the main thing that gave us the ability to collect information. Well, when the principal directions were reviewed, that was part of the operational involvement that I was briefed or instructed to remove us from. Hence, that's why the regulations came into existence.
I was going to come to this a little bit later, but let's touch on it now while you're talking about this. So the regulations that required, amongst other things, junket tour operators to be approved were introduced in about 1999, weren't they?
Yes,
And before then, the requirements that junket tour operators and their representatives had to meet in order to be able to bring a tour to the Perth Casino
yes,
were the subject of Section 24 directions.
yes,
And I showed you the casino directions in their current form
yeah.
a little earlier. So to your recollection, what did those directions provide? So this is pre-regulation.
Pretty much what the regulations ultimately provided.
Was there any difference?
No, I don't think so.
And then we moved to the regulations.
Yes.
Did you have any involvement in the preparation of the regulations?
No.
And then you said you became aware later of the movement to repeal the
Yes,
regulations. That wasn't something that you were proposing, the
Not at
repeal?
all.
Pardon?
not at all.
So where did that impetus for that repeal come from?
As far as I'm aware, the Director General.
That's Mr. Sargent.
Yes.
And was it explained to you the reason behind that impetus?
Okay, so in 1995 or 96, I did a review of the Gaming Commission Act, and that review was presented to the Minister, and there was responses by the Minister. And at one stage we were talking about removing the junket stuff from the directions, and I think it was the Minister's response that, well, if you do that, I want regulations to provide the same information.
Yes, but then we move on and there's this impetus to then either relax or remove the regulations.
Yes.
So was it explained to you why there was that move to relax or remove the regulations?
Not at all.
It was just something that you were told Mr. Sargent wanted to happen.
To be perfectly honest, I found out after the event. I can say that when the regulations were enacted and we were collecting the information, because we no longer had the close liaison with WAPOL, the value of the information we were collecting was questionable, in that we were interviewing a junket representative and asking him for financial information, and we were only recording what he told us. We didn't have any way of verifying the information that he gave us. We didn't have any powers overseas. We didn't have any powers under the Act to get that information verified.
So again, I was going to come to this later, but let's do it now. So you've described the directions and the regulations being more or less, or reflecting more or less the same procedure.
Yes.
Now, separately from that, you've just mentioned a change in the sense that the police were involved in the process at one point and then later weren't.
That's right.
So when did that happen relative to the introduction of the regulations?
I think it was around the time that the department stopped funding the police officers' position.
But relative
Sorry,
to
the gaming.
Yes, all right. So relative to the introduction of the regulations. Was it before the regulations were introduced or after?
Sorry, what was?
I'm talking to you about the police involvement. So you mentioned police were involved and then they weren't involved in the junket procedures.
I think it was before the regulations.
And you talk about is it the department not funding what in relation to the police?
Sorry, when I said it, I meant the Gaming and Wagering Commission funded a position in the police department to look at junket activity.
So that you described that before, I think before the break, you said that there were 2 people?
Yeah.
Casino control unit or
Yeah, investigation unit.
investigation unit. And that was funded by GWC
Yes.
up until a point prior to 1999, which is when the
Yeah.
regulations were introduced.
Yes, as far as I know, yeah.
And so when you had a junket procedure before 1999 and the police were involved in it,
Yes.
what did the police do?
They would take the junket representatives' fingerprints. They would do probity as much as they could overseas on the junket representative.
So did you being department/GWC, gather information, passport details, other
Yes.
information, and provide it to the police in that unit?
Yeah, they had all the information that we collected, yes.
You gave it to them, you being GWC/department.
Yes.
And separately, they took the fingerprints of the tour operator or representative.
Yeah, I mean, in practical terms, it usually occurred at the same time we were interviewing them. The police would come in and take their fingerprints.
So, and did they participate in the interview at all?
No,
They observe it.
no, they took the fingerprints.
So you had an interview, you were supplied with additional information apart from the interview, and the interview information and all the other information, presumably by way of documentation, went to the police who performed investigations.
Yes,
And so that ended before 1999
as far as I can recall, yes.
because GWC stopped funding that police position.
Yes,
And do you know why?
no.
And then after the police were no longer involved, you still had the interview process
Yeah, because the regulations required it.
and gathered the documentary information.
Yes,
No fingerprints though,
no.
because you wouldn't have had the power to do that. Understood. So what happened to the information that was being collected now without the involvement of the police?
I'm not sure. As far as I can recall, we collected the information and I don't know anymore.
Well, you say you don't know anymore. Did you ever know?
Well, when the police were involved, we knew that they went away and did their probity stuff. I don't know what happened after.
Well, you described a little while ago after 06, and now the regs were repealed in 2010, you
Yes.
recall. So there's about a 3 to 4 year period there where the regulations were still in place and you were in the role of Senior Inspector Compliance.
Yeah.
Now, you described a little while ago that the interviews and so forth were conducted by the compliance stream.
Yes,
So you would have been involved then in interviews and document gathering from junket tour operators. So you would recall then that process and what happened with the information.
that went to head office and
Well, you were at head office, Mr. Toyne. You were the senior
yeah,
inspector.
yeah.
Compliance.
Sorry, it went to the regulatory section of the department.
Well, what do you mean regulatory section? You were part of the regulatory section.
Yeah, sorry. There was a group of officers called regulatory officers that were attached to the policy section.
So it went to policy or licensing or stayed within compliance?
Probably went to licensing. Sorry, yeah.
Well, what? What happened to it?
Would have gone to licensing.
And compliance had no more involvement?
Yes.
Either the approval was given or it wasn't?
Yes.
Understand. Okay. coming back to the job description, we had a little diversion there. So
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
take you back to the job description, which is GWC.002.002.0044. And I was on the next page where we were looking at section 4, and I was asking you about significant regulatory risks, and that's how we got to talking about junkets, those being a significant regulatory risk.
Yeah.
I want to move to another kind of risk. Social harms associated with the increasing sophistication of EGMs.
Yes.
Was that a regulatory risk known to you at the time you were Senior Inspector Compliance?
I was aware that electronic gaming machines are probably the most addictive form of gambling that exists, and that it targeted the most vulnerable people, in that it usually involved lower price to play, if you like.
People who can least afford
Yes,
to become addicted to gambling.
yes,
And there was another issue, wasn't there, a risk associated with EGMs, and that was because of their increasing sophistication, the inability to clearly distinguish them from poker machines.
yeah, yes, definitely.
And indeed, GWC wrestled with this issue of how to clearly distinguish between a poker machine on the one hand and an EGM on the other.
Yeah, although in Western Australia, as far as I'm aware, it had always been that the gaming machines that we had at the casino here involved the player making some active decision rather than just pulling an arm or pressing a button and allowing the machine by its program to do. So, for example, if we had a blackjack machine here, then the player would be given the opportunity in that game to draw additional cards. So, although it was a fine line difference, there was an active involvement of the player in decision making.
And the lack of involvement of the player is understood to be particularly pernicious, something that's not desirable.
Well, it just meant that they lost money quicker because the spin rate was faster and whatever.
So a slower rate of play that is caused by the requirement for more player interaction
Yes,
gives more time for reflection
yes,
so that a person can consider whether they should keep playing.
yes,
Yet, as EGMs continue to evolve, and this was the position in 06 through
Yes.
to 012, through to 2012, wasn't it? The question was, well, should we be doing something more to address the risks in terms of social harms occasioned by EGMs?
that certainly wasn't the inspectorate's approach. Or
Is it something that you reflected on?
personally,
Yes.
yes,
Well, it was in your job description to identify significant regulatory risks.
yes,
And did you identify it as a significant regulatory risk during your term as Senior Inspector Compliance?
in consideration of new games, new electronic gaming machines, yes.
In what way?
Well, whether the game being proposed still involved active participation by the player,
Is that all?
yeah.
Did you consider such things as the rate of play?
The approval of gaming machines moved from the compliance area to the what I call this regulatory officer area. A lot of them,
Do you mean licensing?
yes.
So you didn't approve EGMs in the compliance section?
No,
But coming back to your job description, one of the aspects of your job was to identify significant regulatory risks and the development of appropriate risk treatment. So did you, for example, ever propose a treatment plan for addressing the highly addictive characteristics of EGMs?
No.
Do you know if either of the other senior inspectors compliance did so?
I do know, and the answer's no.
And is there any reason for that?
It just wasn't on our radar, if you like. It was.
Well, you did say, though, a moment ago that you did understand that EGMs were the most addictive form
Absolutely.
of gambling and targeting those people who were arguably the most vulnerable.
Yes.
So it actually was on your radar, wasn't it?
When we were, at the time that I was involved in the approval of gaming machines, prior to it moving to the licensing section, we were looking at whether it met the return to play of the return to player that the Gaming Wagering Commission had authorised, if you like. Those items to do with problem gambling were more the remit of the Commission itself than inspectors.
Well, why do you say that?
It wasn't something we took into consideration when approving a gaming machine.
But your job description was to identify significant regulatory risks. You would accept, wouldn't you, that the risk of social harm through the playing of addictive EGM gaming is a significant regulatory risk?
Yes.
Is it just something that you overlooked?
It was overlooked by the compliance division. I don't say that individuals overlooked it.
But I'm looking at your job description, Mr.
Well, that was a generic job description for three positions. We may have made a comment if the casino wanted to increase the number of EGMs.
Or you're speculating? Or are you recalling having cautioned against increasing the number of EGMs?
I'm speculating if we were asked, but we weren't asked.
But there's lots of things you could do, isn't there, to address the social harms arising from EGMs?
Yes.
Such as a lockout of the machine after a certain period of time that it's been played by the one user,
Yes.
and limits on the amount that can be expended in the one period of play.
Yes.
And you could even think about warnings coming across the screen after
Yeah.
requiring, as opposed to a full lockout, periods where the machine is just paused for 5 minutes,
Yes.
again to allow the player the opportunity to reflect.
Yes.
You never propose those sorts of things.
No, it's that was something considered at a higher level.
Well, it's a treatment plan that you could have propounded to those above you, couldn't you?
In relation to EGMs, it was never explained or expected of us that we would look at that type of issue as senior inspectors.
So do I understand it correctly that when we're looking at your job description and the job description of the other senior inspector's compliance, where it says identification of significant regulatory risks and development of appropriate risk treatment plans, that was within the boundaries set for you by people above you?
Yes.
in the departmental hierarchy?
Yes.
And who precisely, at what level?
Directors and Director General and Deputy Director General.
And do you mean that they would either informally or more formally explain to you what the objectives of your role were, and therefore the sorts of regulatory risks you were supposed to be identifying and dealing with?
Yeah, problem gambling, there was an officer specifically dedicated in the licensing area for problem gambling. So any sort of assessment of things like lockouts and warnings and whatever would be performed by that officer, and that information would be put forward to directors or deputy director general or the director general.
So hindsight, of course, is a wonderful thing, but having asked you those questions now and looking back when you look at your job description, is it something that you think with that wonderful hindsight that you could have addressed in the course of your role as Senior Inspector Compliance, or do you maintain that it was outside your remit in terms?
We could have if we were encouraged to, yes.
And do you say you were either not, is it the case that you weren't encouraged in the sense that it wasn't brought to your attention, or you were actively discouraged from looking at regulatory risk of social harms?
It was an area handled by the problem gambling officer within the department, so it wasn't something that we were...
So it was a structural issue that because that structure existed, you inferred that that wasn't part of your job?
It was more than inferred. It wasn't part of our job to look at that risk.
So if you had put your head up suggesting that the EGMs be managed in this way in the casino manual, those who were working in the problem gaming area would regard you as encroaching on their turf. I had the feeling that if I had recommended something like that, I don't know if my opinion would have been valued. Well, we don't know if it would or if it wouldn't have.
The only example I can give you is over time the casino has introduced a number of bets on gaming tables that colloquially are referred to as sucker bets.
Sucker bets.
Yeah, high house advantage and attractive to a player because they, on the face of it, offer high return, but in fact the bets are such a high house advantage that it's probably not worth betting on them. Now, so when a casino first starts off, if you like, during the honeymoon period, they're making lots of money because people, like in Perth, for example, people generally didn't know how to gamble at casino games. So even though the house advantage might only be, say, 3 or 4%, they were making far in excess of that. Over time, even if it's simply the fact that the player loses so much money, they learn strategies one way or another. And the house advantage, or the return to the casino drops because players have learned some form of strategy. I'm talking about table games here. There's only 2 ways then that the casino can, or 3 ways that the casino can then increase their profits. That's either to encourage more people to come and gamble, or to increase the table limits, so increase the price to play, or introduce bets on the table that offer a higher house advantage and might increase your revenue off that gaming table.
Can you just give me an example in sort of practical terms of a sucker bet?
Yeah, probably a lot of gamblers that disagree with me because they follow it, but it's a bet called perfect pairs on blackjack, where what you're betting is that you'll get dealt a pair, say 8 of clubs, in the round of play. There's 8 decks of cards in a blackjack shoe. They use shuffling machines and they continuously shuffle in between each hand, so it's highly unlikely that...
So the odds are very poor. That's why
poor.
It's a sucker bet.
Yeah, that's what it's referred to colloquially by casino staff, if you like.
But your point of telling me all this was to say that these were introduced at some point?
So inspectors would be asked to write reports on the introduction of those bets, and inspectors may offer opinions that those bets were not.
Did that happen
Yes,
in your time?
yes.
About when?
In the early 2000s.
I was
Now.
about to say, if you could even confine it to a decade, that would be
Yeah, in the
useful.
2000s. Yeah.
And maybe the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And so these particular bets, you say, were the subject of reporting by the inspectors?
Well, the inspectors, at that stage, when a new proposal for a new bet, if you like, was introduced, inspectors were asked to provide a report on, what their opinion was. Did the proposal meet the requirements of the rules, such like?
Yes, and then I think your point was to tell me what happened when that report was given.
Well, perfect bets is a bet at the casino. Perfect pairs is a bet at the casino. So
Despite
reservations.
expressed by the inspectors
Yes.
about the fairness of that game to players.
Yes.
And is your point to say that the way in which those reservations were received once expressed gave you no encouragement to raise concerns about the fairness of things such as EGMs?
Yes.
If we come back to section 4 of the job description, please, you'll see under that second dot point that we've been dealing with at length, we've got the job description to monitor and review various activities through the implementation and conduct of audit and inspection programs.
Yes.
Now, what I'd like to do here is ask you to reflect on and provide some evidence about whether and to what extent the audit and inspection processes in the 2006 to 2012 period changed from the earlier periods that you were involved in casino inspection. So first of all, you will see there that under the first dot point it says casino gaming operations including but not limited to the operations of the casino main bank. We'll take that one first. Now, the main bank you understand to be a reference to that part of the main cage where all the revenue's accounted for?
Yeah. So there's what's called a chip bank, which holds all the stock of chips, and then there's the main bank, which deals with the cash.
Right, but when you've got that sort of final reconciliation of the day or the month, that happens at the main bank, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So through 2006 to 2012, did you implement any new audit or inspection programs for the main bank?
My recollection is by that stage the audit programs were being developed by this regulatory team, which were...
Do you mean in policy?
They were loosely attached to policy, yes.
Right, now, so none of the three compliance inspectors had involvement with that? Senior inspectors compliance, I beg your pardon.
We had involvement to the extent that we would provide input into the development of the programs, but we didn't develop the programs.
So the audit of the main bank in that time, 2006 to 2012, to your knowledge, did it change from how it had been previously?
Well, the audit program may have changed, but I can't recall.
Think back to just before you left casino regulation and moved exclusively into liquor licensing, whether you were doing it the same way you had in the late 90s, early 2000s. Bearing in mind that there was less physical presence on the floor of the casino of inspectors.
The only thing I can recall is that the audit programs relied more on source documents and information provided by the casino operator rather than by information garnered by inspectors.
Right, now, source documents, what are you referring to?
So, for example, at the end of the soft can, a master game report would be produced which broke down the revenue from each table. As I said, in the initial days we were in the soft can room. That master game report was produced and signed by all staff and we took it there and then. Later on, that master game report was provided to us by the casino operator. So,
How would you know that they were counting all of the revenue and putting it into the master sheet?
well, the only way to verify that by then was to go through the surveillance tapes of the soft can.
But you only did that when inspectors were on the premises, which was not every day.
That's right, yeah.
So it created a risk that on the days the inspectors weren't there, if there was, that not all of the revenue would be counted and included in the master sheet.
A potential risk, yeah.
Yes, but whether that happened or not, no one would know.
Yeah.
All right, now the next one is security and surveillance departments. There was a job requirement to implement audit and inspection programs and conduct them in relation to security and surveillance departments. Did that change in 2006 to 2012?
Well, again, the same thing occurred in that the audit programs were generally developed by this regulatory officers and inspectors would conduct the audits. The main change that I noted was that to conduct an inspection program, previously, as I said, we were on the premises, I decided to do, or I was allocated a security audit, I would walk into the security department and start my audit. When you're not based there, it required us to ring up and make appointments to meet the manager or...
Why was that? Why could you not have just shown up?
Because, well, we could, but to interview the managers and whatever, we had to ensure that they were in that part of the premises when we turned up to interview them.
But when it comes to surveillance, you would expect the casino operator to have people monitoring the security cameras at all times?
That was a requirement of the directions. One of the concerns that inspectors had is that it specified the manning levels. So one of the concerns that inspectors had is once this change, if you like, came into being, by the time we got there, if the manning levels were down by the time we got there, they could be up.
What change are you referring to there?
Where we were no longer a permanent presence at the casino.
But if you conducted a random inspection, that would be a way of checking. An unannounced inspection.
Yeah, except that their surveillance system is so good they could see us coming from the Great Eastern Highway. And we entered through staff entry.
And they all, the people who operated the cameras could, I think the story goes, doesn't it? They knew the number plates of the department vehicles.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they'd raised the boom on the car park.
Yeah, they also...
Before you, as you arrived, in recognition of the department vehicle.
Yes, they also knew the faces of every government inspector.
So there was, is the short point, there was no possibility of conducting a truly unannounced inspection. They'd at least have a few minutes' notice while you parked the car and made your way to the casino.
Absolutely.
Did you think of that at the time as a weakness in the system?
Yes.
Did you raise that concern with anybody?
Yes.
Who?
My directors.
So can you name them?
Look, when the decision was made to start removing inspectors from the casino, I wasn't in favour of that regulatory model. My belief is that you need a permanent presence at the casino. And I raised that with Mr. Howells, my director. Various times I raised it with Mr. Connolly. Quite a lot of other inspectors. Well, the initial group of inspectors were not in favour of reducing the regulatory control that we had at the casino.
So you raised it with both Mr. Howard and Mr. Connolly?
Yes.
And over what sort of period of time are we talking?
Well, from the moment it was first mooted to reduce the presence at the casino.
And we're just trying to remember, I'm trying to remember your evidence about when that was.
Probably mid to late 90s.
And continuing on till when? When did you sort of stop? My words, not yours, complaining about that reduction.
Amongst themselves, the inspectors never stop complaining about it, but
But just in terms of complaining up the line.
in colloquial terms, how many times you bang your head against a brick wall. So it was obvious to us that the decision wasn't going to be altered.
When did you give up? Just approximately, Mr.
Yeah.
So maybe I can help you by putting it this way. Do you feel like you repeated those concerns over the course of a year or over the course of several years?
Over the course of several years.
From 1999?
Yes.
And are we talking 10 years or something less than that?
Probably 10 years. Yeah.
Thereabouts, not 20 years.
Not 20 years. So at least until I was no longer involved in casino regulations.
So that would take us through to about 2012.
Yes.
And what was the typical response that you got when you raised these concerns?
Basically, the decision's been made.
And was it ever explained to you by whom?
The driving force behind the removal of inspectors from the casino was the Director General, Barry Sargent.
All right, now coming back to your job description, the last activity in this bullet point I had you at, we just discussed security and surveillance departments, and then there's internal audit. Do you understand what's being referred to there?
Yes.
What is it?
The casino has an internal audit section.
Which does what?
Well, I don't know. I was never allocated an audit of the internal audit and never met with the internal auditors. That was people above me. Although I do believe that the current manager compliance has involvement with internal audit.
So you're not able to say what the internal audit function of the casino operator was or what it entailed?
No.
Do you know whether it was something that was carried out on the casino premises?
The internal audit?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
You do?
Yes.
And do you know where?
Well, I know internal audit was located in the executive offices, but that's all I know.
Right. And that was throughout the period from when you were involved in casino regulation,
Yes.
from 85 through to
No,
2012?
in 85 an internal audit didn't exist.
Did not exist?
That's right.
So when did it commence?
Oh, I wouldn't be able to say with certainty.
So let's settle for something less than roughly.
It probably, from my recollection, it probably got created about the same time that AUSTRAC requirements came into being.
So if we said the mid-2000s, would that accord with your recollection roughly?
Yeah, yeah.
So in around the time you were Senior Inspector Compliance, and for the duration of that time,
Yeah,
you're aware of an internal audit function that the casino operator had,
yes,
and located in the executive offices,
yes,
and were the executive offices the subject of camera surveillance?
no.
And do you know who within the regulator involved themselves in auditing and inspecting the internal audit function of the casino operator?
After 2012, it was Mr Connolly.
And before then?
It would have been director level. It wasn't something that the inspector did.
Well, there's a few different levels of director, isn't there, in the department, and was before 2012?
Yeah, so the divisional director.
Well, we come back to you've got a policy stream and a compliance
Oh,
stream
sorry.
and a licensing stream.
So the compliance, director compliance.
So was that Mr Connolly?
Yeah.
Now, just bearing in mind that between 06 and 2012, he was away at fisheries
Yeah.
about 2010 to 2012.
Yes.
So can you remember who was responsible for the internal audit in that 10 to 12 period?
No, I can't.
And because your job description expressly says that refers to you being involved in the implementation and conduct of audit and inspection programs to monitor the internal audit, did you ever raise with anyone in the department or GWC why you weren't performing that function?
I know because the director of the operations area or compliance area, as far as I was aware, was performing that function, and he had no issue with the fact that the senior inspectors compliance weren't doing it.
Now, between 2006 2012, did you implement any new audit or inspection programs with respect to junket activity?
No,
Do you know if either of the other senior inspectors compliance did?
no, I don't know.
Did you have any involvement in developing auditing inspection programs or conducting audit or inspections of the casino operators' bank accounts?
No, I didn't have any involvement in, and no, I didn't conduct any audits.
Do you know if the other senior inspectors compliance did?
I don't recall inspectors or senior inspectors being involved in audits of bank accounts.
And do you know if between 06 and 2012 anyone up the line, if you will, in the department was looking into the bank accounts of the casino operator, reviewing them?
I don't know.
You remember if Perth Casino commenced using the Psycho software as a financial management tool while you're in this role of senior inspector
Yes.
compliance? They did.
Yes.
And was any audit or inspection program developed with respect to Psycho?
I understand there was an audit program developed. However, I certainly didn't receive any training on Psycho, and I can't say how much training inspectors got.
So let me understand, about when do you recall Psycho being introduced?
I was after Crown took over.
After Crown took over?
Yeah.
So just approximately?
Tell me when Crown took over.
I think that was about 08, earlier, 04, thank you.
Yeah, so it would have been maybe 06. All right,
And-
yeah.
You weren't involved in auditing or inspecting Psycho, or you were?
I wasn't.
Was not? Was anybody, to your knowledge?
I don't think inspectors were. I don't know if anyone else was.
Did you ever see the audit program,
For Psycho, no.
but you knew it existed?
I knew there was one being developed. I don't know if it existed.
I see. So you don't know whether it actually ever came into being?
Yes.
It's coming down to section 4 down the bottom of this page, Mr. Toyne. you'll see under that, do you see where we were, and there were 3 dot points just where I was, and then we go out and we tab out and it says provides significant input and assistance in the development and review of policy procedures, regulatory controls across all areas of regulated activity. See that?
Yes.
In relation to casino regulation, who had the primary responsibility for the development and review of policy and regulatory control?
The Director of Compliance, Mr Connolly.
Can you describe what input you had into that task?
We would review, inspectors would review procedures. We may look at regulatory controls, but we weren't involved in the review of policy.
So regulatory controls, that would include the casino manual as the primary regulatory control tool?
Yes.
So you were involved in reviewing the casino manual?
And submissions to amend the casino manual.
So the casino operator could propose that there be an amendment to the casino manual, and that would be considered, and yes?
Yes.
The other way would be that the department or GWC could initiate itself a consideration review of whether or not the manual should be amended.
Yes.
And what was the more frequent situation?
The casino operator requesting amendments.
Did the regulator ever propound amendments or make amendments of its own initiative to the casino manual?
For example, the policy to do with ATMs and the distance from the casino floor and such like was a Gaming Commission policy.
Would you put it in rough percentage terms over 2006 to 2012, the percentage of amendments that were instigated by the casino operator on the one hand, the regulator on the other?
90-10.
And were the amendments that were made, whoever they were instigated by, were they always approved by GWC, or were they was the manual sometimes amended by an officer using delegated power?
Significant changes were approved by the GWC.
And what amounts to something that's a significant change?
For example, casino proposed amending supervision levels for gaming tables. And that was a significant change to the regulatory oversight of tables, if you like, by the operator himself. So that was a proposal that went to the casino operator, went to the Gaming and Wagering Commission. Yeah.
And give me an example of one that wouldn't be.
It'd be very minor stuff that wouldn't be.
Such as?
I mean, even the casino operator proposed, if they proposed an employee be exempt from wearing an ID badge, in general terms, that would be approved without reference to the Gaming Commission, but within policy guidelines established by the Gaming Commission.
So if we could try explaining it or illustrating it again by percentages, the rough percentage of amendments that would require approval by the GWC?
That'd be higher, that'd be more likely 80%.
80%?
Yeah.
And who got to decide whether an amendment went up to the GWC or was dealt with via delegated power?
Either the Director of Compliance or the Director of Licensing.
So the one sitting just under the Director General?
Yeah, until the Deputy Director General position got created.
And was, in that period 2006 to 2012, can you recall whether the casino manual was ever amended to impose requirements
can't recall.
And in the period 2006 to 2012, was there any point at which either you or one of the other senior inspectors compliance took on the job of actually reviewing the casino manual as a whole to see whether or not it should be amended to address regulatory risk?
No, we didn't, no.
So to your knowledge, has the casino manual ever been, to use an expression, overhauled in the time that the casino's been in operation?
Yes, there was one time, yeah. So the process of amending the casino manual was often quite laborious. So there was one stage where, to do with the games procedures and whatever, there was a concept that we'd have a generic procedural manual to do with things that are common to every game, and then there would be, if you like, annexes to that manual with specific rules to the individual games that was specific to the individual games.
Now, I guess what I'm driving at is this, Mr. Toyne. You've got a casino manual that was first implemented in 1985.
Yes,
And so that's several decades
yes,
ago. And it has been amended on an ad hoc basis and typically at the instigation of the casino operator.
yes.
Has any consideration been given to updating and, if you like, future-proofing the casino manual to make it overall a contemporary document for modern casino gaming operations?
I don't know if that's been, sorry, I cannot recall a specific project to do that, but the casino manual is a dynamic document that was being amended all the time.
Well, that's rather my point, Mr. Toyne. It starts life in 1985
Yep,
and then it changes and grows, but in a very ad hoc way
yes,
to deal with specific issues.
yes,
So one, of course, which is quite topical, is the regulation and oversight of junket tours.
yes.
But has anyone ever considered standing back and looking at the manual as a whole and asking themselves whether it should be amended in a holistic way, indeed by way of a substituted manual, so that all of the parts are coherent and consistent?
From a regulator's perspective, I'm not aware of that.
Now that I've put that to you, do you think that that's a suggestion that has merit?
Yes.
And why do you say that?
Well, to ensure it's current and up to date.
Do you have concerns about the contents of the current manual in that regard?
No,
And why not?
because it's a dynamic document that's continually been amended and the regulator has ensured that we've always got a copy of the current manual.
When you make a change to one part of it, because the manual's enormous, isn't
Yes,
it? Consideration isn't being given to how it fits with each and every other aspect or part of the manual, is it?
not necessarily. It depends on the subject matter that you're amending.
That's a convenient point.
All right,
Commissioner.
we'll resume at 2 p.m.
All rise.
Jesus Christ.